Good evening, everyone. We are going to get started in about 1 minute. Thank you all for logging in to our UEO Ed Talk this evening. We sincerely appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our conversation. So we'll get started in about 1 minute. Thank you all for joining us this evening for UEO Ed Talk. What we have this evening is a conversation about what we see happening in our communities, about learning for our students, about the trauma that our young people are seeing. And we are just, again, so grateful that each of you are joining us for this evening. Our communities locally, nationally, and globally are experiencing and learning to navigate unfamiliar spaces due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nationally, we are being reminded of the state of race relations and failed systematic frameworks, but are working diligently and with fervor to push for a transformed and just future. With all that happening, every aspect of our lives has been altered, including education, teaching and learning. Parents and guardians have been called upon to take on an even greater role in their child's academic endeavors, along with continuing to maintain their work schedules, all in a virtual space. We understand the tremendous effort that it takes from all invested in our young people's potential and success, and that our summer will also look very different. Therefore, the educators of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Upsilon Epsilon Omega chapter have teamed up to initiate a conversation with the Baltimore County community in order to support continued learning and educational engagement with our young people and provide some guidance on what may be challenging conversations about our current state of affairs, from COVID-19 to race and identity. This virtual conversation will consist of a panel of UEO chapter educators and mental health specialists on our Zoom platform this evening. A resource guide has also been compiled by members of our chapter that will be shared with the general public as a reference for each and every one of you. And that will be hosted on our webpage, and it will also be shared with you via email this weekend so that you have it in your inbox. So again, thank you for being a part of the conversation on this evening. And we are going to have various presentations from members of our chapter who are educators and administrators. And then we are going to shift into a Q&A. So we welcome you to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we will take them in turn when we get to the Q&A portion of our event this evening. And with that, we are going to have our first set of presenters in the person of Connie Folks. She is an elementary school assistant principal who is a member of our chapter. And I'm going to mute everyone so that everyone can go ahead. Yep, if you can ensure you are muted. All right, so we'll have, as I was saying, summer reading, the importance of summer reading, and reading logs. And our two presenters first are Connie Folks, who's an elementary school assistant principal, as well as Kalisha Miller, who is a middle school principal. And they are both members of our chapter. So at this time, I will ensure that they are unmuted so that they can present. So Connie and Kalisha.
Good evening, good evening. And as our president Kendra said, summer is for reading and for continued learning. So I just want to share with you some strategies as a former primary intermediate teacher that I thought was really helpful for summer learning for my students. Thinking of the things that we did when we were children, visiting local libraries, visiting bookstores, and making reading fun, where children can read on their deck. They can read out in their backyard. They can read in the park, and just different ways, because when it comes to reading, you can take reading anywhere. So I want you to think of reading throughout the summer is part of your vacation. So when you think of reading, I want you to think of books where you can choose a variety of books, because children like to read different types of books. And so they can be informative books. Research shows us that a lot of boys like informative books. So they like to read books about things such as snakes and trains, engineering, things of that nature, where sometimes our girls may like more of a narrative and fairy tales. But as we have gone through the trends of education, that has changed a great deal. So offer a variety of books by visiting the bookstores and talk about books with your children. Children love to talk about what they read. They love to write about what they read. And this is a great comprehension tool to use with your students at home. And nothing's changed about comprehension when it comes to books. It is still those 5 W's, the same 5 W's that we learned when we were elementary school. When your child reads a book, think of what happened. Ask them what happened in the book. Where did the story take place, the setting, who the characters are, why the different events happen, and maybe where the different events happen. And this is also helpful to children to help them reread. And when you're listening to your children, especially primary students, you ask them to read aloud. Nothing sounds sweeter than to hear primary students reading aloud, and children want to read to their family members. But this also gives you a lens into understanding how they read fluently. And so reading should flow. And so rereading and having children read aloud gives you the lens to understand not only their reading flow, but then that comprehension piece as well. And I'm sure you've probably heard sometime when students get kind of stuck on a word, it's not always the decoding, but it's just that fluency of just kind of flowing through the sentences and reading from left to right. So you want to kind of lend an ear to that. But when you think about the intermediate, and when I think of intermediate, I'm talking about 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, still in elementary, their reading's a little more sophisticated. So you may want to ask questions about the author's purpose. They're reading chapter books. You can ask them, what do you think the author was trying to say? What do you think the author's message was? You can ask them, what do they think is going to happen next? Make predictions based on what they've read. This is all part of comprehension. And they're explaining to you what they've learned from the book, but there's also applying those thinking skills as well. And this is what they do every single day when they're in school, is they're reading, they're talking about what they read with a partner in their classroom or either with the teacher. And again, you want to make sure you're discussing the books with the students, and you can also write about their opinion. Students love to tell you what they think about books, whether they like it, dislike it, didn't think it was a good choice, but they love to tell you what they think about books. So I can't tell you enough how important it is to start picking out your books. You can see behind me, I already have my books ready for the summer, the books that I plan to read. And it's good to get a start, because before we know it, the students will be back in some form of school to kind of get those reading logs done and get those books for reading. And I would suggest, put your reading log somewhere where you can see it every day. And it's great. I do a reading log for myself. My family does one, and we read different books together. But it can go on the refrigerator, and they can add books, and they can star them, whether they thought they were a 5-star book or a 2-star book. But that reading log is something that's a reminder, and they can see every single day. Schedule reading time in, whether it's 20 minutes a day. Currently, students are encouraged in primary and intermediate to read between 20, for primary, 15 to 20 minutes a day, intermediate, 20 to 25 minutes a day. I would continue that, because our students have been out of school for a number of months, and the instruction looks a lot different. But prior to that, they're reading every single day, and I would strongly encourage them to do that and read as a family. Research shows that when children see their family where reading is a priority, they are encouraged to read as well. And again, I can't say enough about just making time for reading. Take your books with you, plan for vacation to have your books. Students can read and have their teacher or maybe another family member. Teachers are always willing to read with students, that one weekly phone call sometimes, just discussing the book, but it can be done with a family member as well. But take books on vacation, and that way you're all prepared. It can be part of your packing. So I hope those tools were helpful as you think of reading and learning continued throughout the summer.
Good evening. I will be speaking more from the secondary and young adult level. And I just want to start with some research that shows that underdeveloped literacy skills are the #1 reason why students are retained, assigned to special education, put in remedial classes, and even why they fail and drop out of high school. So really the urgency is for our students to continue reading, but not only reading, but also writing about what they're going to be reading this summer. Because students have been out of school since March, it is imperative that this summer students continue to read, because there's a natural lag in the summer, just naturally, but this year that lag is going to be highlighted even more for all of our students. The reading is really fundamental for every single student this summer, even middle and high school students. Literacy really speaks to the larger society issues of access and equity. When our students are able to read and write, that literacy opens up doors and opens them wide for our students. So in our resources, we've given you different books based on age level for elementary and secondary. And really for the secondary students, a lot of our books really focus on what's happening now in our world, in our society about social justice. You know, our secondary kids, and if you're reading the news, they're really leading the charge. In Baltimore County, just I think it was yesterday, there was a protest in March in Catonsville that was started by a group of high school students. So our students are really eager to know more about our history. They're eager to know about how to peacefully protest. So some of the books that we've included are books that students are able to read about this information. And as it was stated earlier, even with older students, as they're reading, ask them to tell you what they're reading about. Have them to write to you, even on a daily basis, what's one thing that they got out of the reading that they didn't know before they picked up the book. Again, always reinforcing that reading and writing as that literacy piece, because again, as we know, we've never been through this before. And to be honest, as educators, we don't even know what impact COVID-19 is going to have on our students until we get back face to face with them. And we don't know when that might happen. So just resources for students to be able to read, the log. Secondary students don't always like to do the log, so more for secondary students, if they create, like, we call them little diaries, where they're writing to you to tell you what they read in the book, how they liked it, how they're feeling about what they're reading in the book, and then have that dialogue conversation with them. And that helps reinforce their reading comprehension as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kalisha and Connie, for sharing with us about summer reading, the importance of reading, and about reading logs. And I see a few questions that have come in, so we're going to get to those in our Q&A session. So please ensure that you are adding your questions there, and we will definitely circle back to those. And I will ask that Kalisha and Connie can just look at those questions and be ready to answer them when we come back to the Q&A shortly. Thank you. Next, we will have Virtual Learning Tools by Dr. Cecilia Wright Brown, faculty member at Morgan State University, and Talia House, an ELA teacher. Dr. Brown?
Good evening, Sorors. So I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about the STEAM resources. And in this scenario, we have 2 A's in our STEAM, science, technology, engineering, architecture, art, mathematics. So the resources that are in the guide are for K through college. So there is something in there for children, young adults, teachers, adults, and parents. I encourage you to use these STEAM resources and share them with family and friends. So what do we have under STEAM. So we have a number of resources from the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, as you know, is a resource that's less than 50 miles away, but they have done an excellent job of providing STEM, arts, history resources for adults, children, for the family. So one of the first resources that you'll find in the guide is the Spark Lab, which is a hands-on invention studio. This is excellent for engineers, budding engineers and computer scientists. We have the Learning Lab, which is really, I spent some time on the Learning Lab myself to refresh some of my basic science skills. The African American History Museum has an excellent virtual resource that is available for the arts. Natural History also has an excellent resource for arts and architecture. A lot of people are not really, aren't really aware that history and architecture are very closely related. And there's some excellent resources from the Smithsonian Natural History that can be found in our guide. We also have Air and Space represented, and then the beautiful National Portrait Gallery for Arts and Architecture. In addition to that, we have some beautiful resources from the Kennedy Center. So what the Kennedy Center is doing is they are rebroadcasting honorees, programs that they've honored. So they honor individuals in arts, history, music. So we have a link for you to go to the Kennedy Center to look at some of the rebroadcast programming that they have available. I wanted to add an international flavor. So the National Theatre, which is one of the UK's most, it's three prominent publicly funded art venues. I think it's the National Theatre, I think it's Royal Shakespearean, and the Royal Opera House. There is a resource there. They have some excellent arts and theater resources that are for the entire family. Then we have Science Buddies, which is a nonprofit organization, and they have a K through 12 parent and teacher resources. But what I like about Science Buddies is that they are quick, so you can access them quickly. They're easy to use, and the most optimum environment is they're free. Then we have one of our favorites, YouTube. So YouTube has a channel that's called The Show Must Go On. And what they're going to be doing, or they'll continue to do, is to have musicals each week. And usually the musical comes out on Friday. So this is a good way to bring the family together. You can look at a beautiful musical, you can sing together and laugh together. Then we have the National Science Teaching Association. So the Science Teacher Association, they love to tie in not just STEM and STEAM, but they also bring in the visual arts. They also bring in the reading. They also bring in the history. So I have provided a link with resources from the National Science Teaching Association. Then we have virtual tours, hands-on activities, and videos that are all centered around STEAM and STEM. These are excellent opportunities if you want to just, if you have some free time and you want to put your young person in a learning environment that maybe is not hands-on, we have videos for that. We have tours for that. So you have options, hands-on, video, virtual tours. So we have a number of STEM options for you. Also, I want to call to your attention that Morgan State University has an annual STEM Expo. And given COVID-19, we will not be able to have the face-to-face option, but we will be having the virtual STEM Expo, and that will be coming fall 2020. So look out for that information. And last but not least, I had a very good conversation today to speak with individuals on what type of financial literacy resources we can bring into the STEAM arena, because mathematics and finance go hand in hand, to tie in one of our targets, which is Target 3, into the STEAM arena. So look out for the STEM Expo virtual webinar, and look out for some financial literacy tools tied into the STEAM resource guide. Thank you.
A wonderful thank you, Talea.
Hi, my name is Talia House. I'm an ELA or English Language Arts teacher. I'm also a reading specialist with grades 1 through 12. I'm going to go ahead and go piggyback off of what Dr. Brown was saying as far as the virtual tours. During this time of distance learning, I found that my students were most engaged in virtual tours and field trips. And a lot of times we would provide the links for those places, and it would be a variety, a range of things like zoos and museums and all that kind of thing. And that will be there's a list with links in the resource guide.
Uh-oh. Are we having trouble hearing Talia?
Also,
Okay, Talia, I think that you went out for about 30 seconds. So if you could repeat what you just said.
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just going over the distance learning virtual tours.
Okay.
And how there is a list in the resource guide with links. They are connected to zoos, they are connected to museums, they are all sorts of things, and a way to engage your students and have a discussion, maybe build a discussion, is simply to ask, what are 3 things you learned from your tour? This gives them some time to work independently and really get into what that particular tour was about. That was for the virtual learning. Again, there's a whole list provided in the resource guide. Also, I wanted to go back to the reading. Being a literacy teacher and reading specialist, there are all sorts of podcasts that are provided, and that too is also in the resource guide. A lot of times they are either informative, where it might be about news or current events, and or narrative. One of the popular ones is one by LeVar Burton, and they can be found on such podcasts as maybe your Apple Podcast or your Stitcher. There are various podcasts that can be accessed even on your phone or through apps on your phone. Also, talking about that read aloud that we were talking about earlier, I have found that when I read aloud to my students, and this is from grades 1 through 8, they really like to be read aloud to. Even adults like to be read aloud to, and they would sit and listen attentively. It could be any kind of story, or just storytelling is big with our kids. And then just as you are reading aloud, it could be a book you're reading. As you're reading aloud, maybe even just think aloud, so that they can see what thinking actually looks like and is modeled. So that is a good way to keep students and your kids involved. Also, there are some online literacy websites such as Scholastic. They provide a lot of reading resources as well, and some interactive games and stories and some questions, as well as I find read work.
Uh-oh, I don't think we can hear you again, Talia. Her computer may have frozen. Okay, I'll wait a few more seconds.
A level of the reader.
Okay, Talia, I think that
Yes.
you went out again for about 10 seconds. I'm sorry. So
I'm sorry.
Talk about the reader one more time.
The read works.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think you went out again, Talia. I am so sorry. Okay, so we're going to come back to Talia in the Q&A. Yeah, I think that you went out again, Talia.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know what's happening with bandwidth. You're talking about ReadWorks.
ReadWorks, yes. Questions are provided, stories are provided on different levels. They can be, it is also has narrative and informative articles, and they also have stories of the day. So you can kind of follow a path for say a week of stories. Yep.
Great.
And the last thing I wanted to touch on was a current thing that I think I find very interesting and needed is social emotional learning. So also, again, provided in the resource guide are ways to get your students to be more mindful, to think about their health and wellness. It might include some breathing techniques, some yoga, how to eat right and exercise, and that too, there's a whole list of those sites that you can access on the resource guide.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Talea. Thank you, Dr. Wright-Brown, for that presentation on virtual learning tools. I know it's extremely critical in this virtual learning environment that we are in. So thank you so much. Now we will have offline learning tools by Brichet Wells. She is a secondary science teacher, and Kwajalein Lewis, who is a first grade teacher. So I believe Kwajalein is going to go first. Actually, I'm sorry, Brichet is going first. So I will unmute Brichet first.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to talk about science because it's my favorite. I have experience teaching 7th, 8th, 9th, 11th, and 12th grade. Haven't got to 10th yet, but I'll maybe get that opportunity soon. So in the resource guide, basically there are links to different websites where students can, or you and your student can go on and you can order science kits. The science kits range from engineering-based, chemistry-based, physics, just depending on what you like. And it's also age appropriate, so you can choose like 2 to 4 years old, or 5 to 10, 10 plus, and things of that nature. So two of the websites, the first being Kiwi Company. It's called Kiwi Co. Again, it's in the resource guide, the link that you can go to. And this particular website offers STEM and STEAM kits. It also gives you monthly subscriptions that you can cancel at any time, because I know that that's a big thing. I know, being in still summer, people, may still have their jobs, may getting back at work. So finances can be an issue sometimes. However, you can cancel the subscription at any time. The kits are affordable. They're between $20 and $30, so it's not too bad. They also offer DIY and arts and crafts ideas for free. So you can just click on DIY, that section, and it gives you different activities. One of those being the melting the crayons, like on a canvas. So you just stick a whole bunch of different colors of crayons onto a paint canvas, and then you take a hair dryer or a blow dryer and just put it over there, and the heat will melt the crayons and it becomes this beautiful artwork. So that's just something that, your kids might be interested in doing. The other website is the Green Kids Crafts. And so it's the same concept. Again, it offers STEM and STEAM kits, still with the monthly subscriptions that you can cancel at any time. Again, doing the different age groups. They offer, which is a little different from the Kiwi Company, they offer a backyard summer camp, which I think is really cool. So again, what will happen is over the summer, you'll sign up for the summer camp, and they'll send you the different boxes for June, July, and August. And they'll, guide you through what they're supposed to be doing with the different activities in the backyard. So I guess even though summer camps are kind of not happening, this is kind of a fun way to still have a summer camp and something to look forward to.
I'm sorry, I'm going to use moderator's privilege and ask you what that was, what you were just referencing with the box for the children.
Okay, that's the Green Kids Crafts.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then there was another resource that I did not put in the resource guide because it kind of hit me today for some reason. And this is something I actually use in my classroom. One of the things as an educator, we're always trying to do cross-cutting curriculum concepts and keep things, related, because at the end of the day, all subjects relate. So science relates to math, and it relates to ELA. So one of the things that I would suggest is going on to Google and just typing in science-related reading comprehension worksheets, and they'll bring up all of these worksheets for different age groups, And it's really basic reading. It's like a small reading, and then it's like 5 questions that goes with it. But it's really helpful in just gauging how well your child is able to read something and then also be able to actually comprehend it. Because you can read all day, but if you don't understand what you're reading, then it's almost like you read it for nothing. Another thing that we do at my school is close reading. And basically what that requires is reading a text 3 times, each time looking at it from a different perspective. So the first time you just read through, the second time you read through and annotate. So you might circle words you don't know, underline words that you may have heard of before but may not understand, put question marks next to things if you have questions about, and then the third read is reading through it after you have learned what those words meant, after you have answered those questions, reading through it again and seeing if your understanding of it has changed from the first read. So I think that is another tool that is useful because it also covers the ELA piece and then it has that science aspect in it as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Bashay.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Kwajalein now. I'm unmuting you. All right, unmuting you. Can you see? Are you okay, Kwajalein? Can you hit the
It wasn't unmuted. Now it's unmuted. Okay,
Great,
good
there you
evening, parents and guardians and sorors. So in the summer guide, you'll find some experiment links that you and your child can do that require little virtual time to do. The websites have the guide has experiments such as make a balloon rocket, fireworks in a jar, make an earthquake, rocket station for your kids, a sundial, musical water glasses, and all of these experiments require materials that you probably would have around in your house. They're not, the websites do not require you to have to make a lot of purchases. So my suggestion would be that you start to collect things that you have already, your paper towel tubes, jars, food coloring. If the experiment requires food coloring, and I think the fireworks in a jar requires food coloring. If you order it from Amazon, it's I think $4 or something. If you have Prime, it's no shipping. I did an experiment with my students before, virtual experiment, and all it required was for me to purchase food coloring. So you'll find that a lot of the experiments that are included in the summer guide do not require a lot of materials that you would have to go out and purchase. These are experiments that you should be able to do with materials, as I said, that you may have at home already. So start to collect items and put them aside, maybe in a box, so that you'll have them ready when you're ready to do these experiments. I also have listed in the guide the ABC Teach, which will give you some summer things that you can do, such as summer journaling, clip art, puzzles. There's a few reading, there's some reading materials that you could print that your child could do. All things that will not require you to be on the computer any great length of time. Please be sure to use YouTube, as was mentioned by one of our other educators, because if you just put in whatever you want, there are a lot of read alouds. Of course, that's more virtual, but there are a lot of read alouds there that your children can listen to. Also, when you're doing the experiments, it may be a good idea that as you work through the experiments, you stop and ask some questions about what you think is going to happen. so that you're not just doing the experiment just for fun, but so that you can do some scientific thinking. You may want to sit down and look at how, especially if you're building the make the earthquake, where it's requiring you to build things, be sure to kind of ask your student or your child, I'm sorry, I'm the teacher brain, your child some questions about how do you think this structure might work if you were to build it a certain way. So you do want them to do some critical thinking as they are working through these various experiments. And even after it's done, what do you think might happen if we were to do this a different way? So we also want to, make sure we include some critical thinking as students are working through the various experiments in the guide. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kwajalein. And thank you, Brashay, for those resources. And again, if you have questions that you would like to have asked during the Q&A, session, please put those into the chat. All right, we are going to shift now to addressing trauma in the current state of affairs. There's so many things happening in our nation, and we know that our young people, our students, our children are seeing them and are a part of them. And so we want to address this topic now. So now we will have Shay Gorham, LCMFT, and Ebony Harley, LMSW and MBA. So we'll start with Shay Gorham. Shay, let me make sure you're unmuted.
Sorry. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Shay Gorham. I'm a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. I also have a 5 and 6 year old. So I've been doing a lot of the things that we're talking about. And actually, we did do the fireworks in the jar, and that was really fun. I had to do like 4 different ones just to make sure we got it right, but it worked out and it was really fun. But I'm here to talk about, I guess, the not so easy part of parenting right now, and that is that our children are seeing everything that's going on in the news. They miss their friends, they miss school, they're trying to figure out what this coronavirus is. And so what I'm going to do is kind of talk about it in groups of age, preschool age, early childhood, and then adolescence. So our preschool age, ages 1 to 5, I believe they're finding it like particularly hard to adjust right now. Change and loss is difficult for them. They haven't yet developed their own coping skills, so they're heavily relying on their parents and guardians and adults around them to kind of guide how they're supposed to be feeling and interpreting everything that's going on right now. A lot of these children, and I don't want it to sound scary, but it is a reality, but some children in this age bracket may regress when it comes to experiencing trauma. A lot of preschool age children may or may not be privy to what's going on in the world around us, but if they are, we have to be aware that that could be secondary trauma and something that they're experiencing. So just some, I was just paying close attention to your children and really just being a safe place for them right now as they try to understand everything that's going on. Preschoolers may resume thumb sucking or bedwetting or getting more attached to their stuffed animals or stuffies or blankets, things like that. I would suggest letting them do it. Let them have some extra cuddle time. That's what that age range needs at this time. They really don't really understand. As we get into early childhood, ages 5 to 11, they may experience very similar reactions to traumatic events, such as seeing protests in their neighborhood or actually experiencing some type of racial injustice in their surroundings, or any type of violence in their neighborhood, or just COVID and not being able to go to school can be really traumatic for children right now. So this age bracket, they will be able to handle the conversation a lot more, but they also may regress and desire a lot more cuddles and more time, I guess, from adults around them. They also, in this age bracket with 5 to 11, they may become a little more aggressive or moody. And that's some things to look out for just to see if it's something that you need to address with your child, or to pay attention to if they are experiencing some type of traumatic effect from the current events. Adolescence, that's probably gonna be, in my opinion, because I have not yet had adolescents in my home, a little more difficult because they understand what's going on, and they understand that, like, what about me? Could this be me? They're gonna have a lot of questions, and I suggest having open and honest conversations with them about what's going on, in particular with the race relations in the protests and the violence that's going on around us right now. I think it's important to just pay attention to them and watch out for withdrawing behavior, isolative behaviors, resistance to authority, disruptive moods, and engaging in like high risk behaviors, alcohol, drugs, things like that, that's not something that is normally expected of them. So that's some suggestions I have as far as some of the current events that's going on. Continue to reassure your children, reassure them that you're there, reassure them that they have positive people around them. If you have a village, bring the whole village in to just love on your children and help get them through all of these times that's going on. Video platforms like this, let them talk to their friends, let them talk to family, and know your child, know what they can handle and what they can't handle as far as conversations on some of the heavy stuff outside of COVID, like the race relations and the protests. You really have to, and it's kind of hard for me to say what your child can handle, but you know your child and speak to them at their level and what you know your child can handle as far as cognitively and emotionally handling some of these conversations. I put some links in the resources, just a few books that are wonderful, and some links on how to talk to your child about race and identity and in the current events. I put just some information on how to spot different behaviors in your children. Like, has your child received any trauma or secondary trauma from the things that he or she or they have been experiencing around them? So just things to look out for. I do talk to parents about things like this cautiously, because I don't want everyone to run and start assuming that their child is experiencing some type of post-traumatic stress disorder or something from all of these things, because at the end of the day, the children are going through a lot, and so they are reacting to it. But so I caution you not to, I don't want to scare you. I don't want to scare parents and guardians, but these are the realities, and this is the times that we're living in, and it is really important to be aware of the ways that our children can be reacting emotionally and mentally to some of these traumatic events that we're experiencing.
Thank you so much, Shay. I think one thing that was absolutely critical in what you said was that you have to know your child and speak to them at their level. And so I already see that there are some questions as a follow-up to what you said, so we're going to come back to them. Okay. But thank you so much, Shay. So we're going to go now to Ebony Harley. I think I've unmuted you.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ebony Harley, and I'm a licensed Master of Social Work. And I think one of the things, I think Shay went over, sort of did a great overview of the things to look for in different age brackets. I would say generally, and the one point that I wanted to make is, how do you hold space for your kids to express themselves about these things? I think that sometimes we forget that kids are little people, and that although they're young, they're still very much processing the things that they see and hear and experience as well. Similar to how you are, they just don't have the language yet. And so it's really, really important for you to ask your kids the questions about what they see and how they feel. And listening for the answer and having a conversation about what those feelings or what the things that they express mean to them. I think one of the things that I see, and I think my youngest client is 11, is that oftentimes adults can dismiss the feelings of kids because they're kids, or they're your baby, but they're still very much processing their lives, right? And this is a really pivotal point in their lives, and that's regardless of age. I think we can all sort of recall moments in our own experiences where, you remember something from when you were 5 years old that your mother would be like, I can't believe you remember that. And this, because it's existing for such a significant period of time, and everything's going to be different after, quote unquote, after, whatever that means, after COVID, after this sort of period in history for, as it relates to racial injustice and race relations in this country. This is absolutely a turning point. And so I think as adults, it's really important that we hold space for our little people to think and to feel and to process, and that you're doing the same for yourselves as well. The other thing I wanted to make sure to say was that, and Shay mentioned this as well, was like secondary or vicarious trauma. And so a lot of times we think that trauma is, and it can be, these very sort of like big, significant, sad maybe events, when really it's anything that for your kid triggers a fight or flight response. And so when I say it's really important that we're having conversations and we're holding space for our children, that's in COVID, but also, that's just in life, so that we get them into the routine of expressing themselves and being able to come to you as a person that is open and willing to sort of hear what they think and how they feel. And so when we talk about trauma, I think this is very much, especially sort of this continuous viewing of Black men and women being murdered, and thinking about sort of what that means for our collective consciousness as adults, but also realizing that our kids are experiencing these events through us. And so I know it's a lot for me, and I can't imagine what it's like for people as parents to sort of experience those things and to process them alongside of raising kids, and also just understanding and being cognizant of the fact that your kids very much sort of soak up your energy. And so that makes it even more important to have the conversations with them about why you may be feeling sad or upset. Of course, your kid, what they can sort of handle or understand. But I think this is probably a time where we lean into those conversations instead of sort of like, versus acting like everything is the same, because it's not. And they know that. And it's important that as sort of the adult and the, I don't want to say like the bigger person, right? But like the more mature person, that we hold space for them, and that we engage them so that they can get the language to talk about how they're feeling. And so if there are things like, as Shay mentioned, if they do withdraw, or if there does seem to be sort of a change in behavior, or, you notice that there's something a little bit different. And this is from we, sort of preschool age all the way through adolescence, that we can begin to have the conversation and that we are even in tune enough to notice that something is changing, because oftentimes some parents don't. And so those are the few things that I wanted to mention. As Shay mentioned, she included some links in the guide. And yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much, Ebony and Shay. I think what you shared was a great end of the conversation because it kind of wraps up and gives the level set of where our young people are now and where we may not know that they are. And I see a comment that is in the chat from Jennifer Purnell Joe. She says, as a therapist, I encourage parents to have age-appropriate conversations with their children. It's hard in these times because everything on the news is mostly bad, but please be mindful of what you're watching in front of your children and also what you are saying. I think that's absolutely critical as well. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. So we are about to shift into our Q&A portion. So if you do have questions, if you could place them in the chat box. With just a few reminders, we are going to have the Summer 2020 Educational Resource Guide that's going to be coming out. If not later this evening, it's going to come out in the next 24 hours. And so we'll send that to everyone who registered for the call. And it will also be on our website. It will be hosted there and we'll share it on social media. And the ways to stay connected to UEO are on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page, and on Twitter. And with that, we are going to go straight to participant Q&A. So I'm going to scroll back up in the chat so that I can go accordingly. I know that the first question was for Kalisha and for Connie. There's a question from Carmen Williams where she says she often cares for her 3-year-old cousin who is a little behind in her speech. Besides the Dr. Seuss series, are there popular kids books that anyone on the call in the webinar can suggest that she can read with her? So I will unmute you, Connie.
Hi, Carmen. As a primary teacher, and I've sat in a number of times with my speech pathologist working with students, I would highly recommend Eric Carle books. That's Eric Carle. And the main reason I say that is because when speech pathologists are teaching various ways for the students to correct their speech, they need to repeat some of the strategies and some of those exercises. So what's great about Eric Carle books is that it repeats the letters, it repeats the words. The one thing that I have always seen that was great about Eric Carle books is that the illustrations, they're engaging. So children want to read them. They have very bright, vibrant colors in the books. And one of my favorites is Brown Bear. And again, it repeats the language so the student can read it over and over and over, and they're practicing that sound. So that would be my very first suggestion for helping I think it was your nephew or 3-year-old that you're helping with speech, is to start with your Eric Carle books.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to unmute Kwajalein as well to see if I know you're a first grade teacher. I'm unmuting you now to see if you want to add anything else to what Connie has stated. You have to unmute yourself. I am clicking on it. Yep. See it pop up.
I agree. I love the Eric Carle books as well. Just to kind of piggyback off of what Connie was saying, any books that are repetitive are going to be books that you would want to read. I don't have any authors per se, but just any books that you see that are very repetitive. And since she's so young, the easier the book, the better, because at some point you'll want her to join in with you reading it. And because it's so repetitive, it will be easy for, I don't know if it's a girl, I'm sorry, for the 3-year-old to join in with you. So any books that you see that are very simple and repetitive would be very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Kwajalein. Okay, and we are going to shift now to, I see that Michelle Robinson stated that she also tutors reading to children. And she says that keeping a log has helped the students that she works with. And we know that keeping a log definitely helps to track the reading that our students are doing. We have Danielle Davis who, yes, I thought I heard a comment. Okay, so we have Danielle Davis who says that she is a Baltimore City Schools principal and she's interested in the reading resources that folks are reading as school leaders that will help her to support her staff as we navigate through the challenges that are very difficult now, but necessary conversations around racial equality and social justice when we return. So I know that Kalisha and Connie are two of our administrators who are on the line. I'm going to unmute you, Kalisha, at this time.
Okay, good evening, Danielle. One book that I would recommend, the title is Courageous Conversations About Race by Glenn Singleton. It's a great book. Actually, my instructional leadership team read the book a couple of years ago, and it really can guide you into having those conversations, courageous conversations about race. Another book that we're actually, as an instructional leadership team, meeting this summer is called Stamp by Jason Reynolds and Ibram Kindu, which is another, it's an interesting book because it's not a history book, but it gives a lot of history, Black history of the United States. And we're actually reading it as an instructional leadership team to see how we can enhance our social studies curriculum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Connie, did you have anything to add in that realm?
Actually, I was going to share the same book. So Khalisa and I were both thinking the same for our staff and our leadership team. There are two books. I purchased this one, but there is another one. It's Stamp the Beginning. And so I'm actually reading this with my family as well, just to have conversations. And when we think about those safe spaces, we want teachers to be able to talk about race. We all work in very diverse schools, and it's important to be able to talk about race. And it can be a little uncomfortable, but that's when the growth is happening, when it gets a little uncomfortable. So I would highly recommend this for staff and just kind of starting out. I'm kind of reading it ahead as sort of leading it for my school. So I was glad to hear Kalisha mention this because it does have a great deal of history, but I think it is a great book to be reading at this time. It kind of puts a lot in perspective.
And I just want to piggyback on that because literally 20 minutes before I joined our call, our webinar, I got an Amazon update that my version of the book is on, it is going to be delayed because there are so many orders. So I'm glad that folks really understand the importance of the book in this season. So next, I have a question here. So Jennifer Purnell, Joe said she is a mental health therapist, and many of the students that she works with have social anxiety and anxiety in general when it comes to reading out loud. She works with children to develop coping skills to help to decrease their anxieties. Her question is, how can I better support the families I work with when sometimes the parents are illiterate themselves? There are times as a therapist, I have to sit and explain what certain things mean to parents because they cannot comprehend the information that the children are getting in school. So how, as administrators and how instructors, and this is open to anyone to share how they help the parents to understand the information that their children are receiving in school. So who would like to answer that question? I will go to, let me scroll down. Let's start with Connie, since I see you up at the top. Let's start with our administrators. I'm Connie and Kalisha. And especially because you're on two different levels. So one is at the elementary school and one is at the high school level. So.
And I wrote down, Jennifer, and I truly understand what you mean, because sometimes some of our parents in my particular school, it's very difficult because for some parents, school was not a success for them. It was not, the best part of their educational career, depending whether it's elementary or middle school. So I applaud you for just taking that so serious and know how important that is. One of the things that I think will be helpful and something that we do in my particular county, I work in Howard County, and a lot of times, and it's a hard conversation to have, I have to be honest, because it's not easy to admit that you don't understand or you don't know how to read. And it's even harder to admit that you don't know how to help your child because you don't know how to read. But, what I think has been helpful is we created such a culture at my school where we can invite parents in and we can have English classes that are offered through Howard County, and we have teachers that will come in and teach those classes. But it is having that conversation in the very beginning. I think it's helpful when parents, and those are my parents that I reach out to, I want them to come to every family night that we have so they can see how learning happens in school, because it's very different. And, Common Core, the way of teaching math is very different. So the more I think they are invited into the school and they have a good understanding of the structure and the instruction that's happening, I think that's helpful because children want to teach their parents at home as well. So they are happy to be able to share that. I know some of the parents on the line, it hasn't been easy to try to teach your child. And it's even harder when you're trying to teach them a different way than their teacher has taught them. That can kind of spoil the night sometime, actually. So I would say definitely trying to invite them or encourage them to become part of the school community more, to be in the buildings. And we as teachers and administrators, we want our parents to be in support of the initiatives at school. We want them to attend the family nights because that helps to strengthen that partnership between home and school. I would also look around in your county for any adult reading classes. They should be offered in every county. I would also encourage the parents to try and have a pre-conference with the teacher if they have questions. Teachers are always open to do that. They're, as long as it's not, I would say, violating their contract. Teachers are very open to wanting to share information about school, even showing parents how they're doing things at school. And they can do this. They can find a time that works for the parent, and they can just kind of go through that. I watch all the time. They're very open with their time, regardless of their contracts or their schedules, because I think when we are helping our parents so they can help their students, then, the only thing that's going to happen from that is the student becomes more successful, and hopefully the parent will become more comfortable with school. I hope that was helpful in some way, Danielle.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Connie. Okay, I am going to go to the next question just to ensure that we... Yes.
I just wanted to add something really quick to that, because Connie hit on just everything I was going to say. Having the parents be as involved as possible, back to school nights. One of the things we do at the school I teach at, which is in Baltimore City, is a coffee clash, and that's every first Friday of the month. And basically we give parents an update as to what is going on for that month ahead, or things that, may be coming up. So for example, if we'll tell them when progress reports dates are, to be out, report cards, if we're having any types of events in between. Another thing is, and this is coming from my kind of science math background, when parents do come for back to school night, or if parents have questions about student grades, one thing that I do is I break down the grade as much as possible. Sometimes percentages are hard to understand. So just saying classwork is worth 25% is just not a good way to look at it. So I like to do examples. That's always my way of getting to the parents. So I show them with basic numbers, like, if your child got a 50 this quarter and a 70 this quarter, it's going to average out to a 60. And I think that helps them because it doesn't have them trying to do the math. It just has them simply watching what I'm doing and then maybe encouraging them to do it. But I also teach my students so that they can go back and teach their parents how to look at their grades and know where the grade has actually come from. So, but like I said, Connie hit on just what I was going to say, having parents as involved as possible.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Rashay. Okay, we are going to go to the next question. There is a question Danielle Davis says that she thanks Shay Gorham for the information. She says she is a school principal of a social and emotional intensive learning site, and that it's been a joy because we have had resources on hand to address trauma. However, now that we are not together, she's concerned about getting this type of information to parents. Do you have any books or websites to recommend for parents about these developmental stages in SEL that I can share with my school community? So that is a question for Shay and also for Ebony. So Shay, let me find you, if you can unmute yourself. There you are, okay. Yes.
Hi, Danielle. So there are some really good resources actually attached to this presentation, and I would definitely suggest sending that out to your school community and to parents. It is really hard, and it kind of goes to what everyone was just previously talking about, and that is how do right now when sorry, those are my children.
It's fine.
Sorry. So right now, when there are no teachers, no, therapists present, it's kind of hard. And honestly, if they're struggling with their child, then it might be kind of difficult for them to interpret some of the information in some of the articles. I would honestly suggest trying to get them to talk to someone in addition, such as a child therapist or someone who can help with those social and emotional difficulties that they're having. Lots of therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, everyone are doing telehealth, and they can do this, like a video type session over the phone. A lot of things can be done to help the child and the parent, because it's really systemic when you really look at it. And parents are having a lot, and I'm noticing as a therapist, as I'm doing therapy with, I do typically work with adults, and my adults are struggling to interpret the information that I'm sending them, and then in turn learning it well enough to then utilize the information with their children. So I guess my greatest concern is the information not being effectively utilized. But there are lots of therapists, there are lots of practitioners who can actually step in and help via actual therapy sessions. But again, the resources that are linked in this presentation are really good. They're resources that I utilize, that I have been sharing with my clients on a regular basis, and some are having really good success with it. And again, like I said, some are having difficulty interpreting the information. But I do suggest you utilizing those resources.
Great, thank you, Shay. So I have two questions that I am going to ask Ebony to answer, and I'm going to group them together. So Jasmine Bryant has the questions of how we can best support our youth, especially in our communities, through these hard times. She says, this is from Jasmine Bryant. She says that she doesn't have children, but she's concerned for our youth, as well as navigating virtual learning while juggling race relations in the pandemic. And there's also a question very similar from Bianca Epsilon, where she says she's concerned for her daughter when she returns to school. She has a friend whose parents are racist, and despite that, the two girls talked and played at school often. Her daughter is concerned that due to protests, she might not have her friend anymore. So how might I address social justice with my child without her being afraid? So Ebony, if you could lead off on answering that, and then Shay, if you could chime in as well. Let me make sure you're unmuted. All right, right there. You see it, Ebony? All right, Shay, would you like to take that? I'm going to unmute you now. Okay, Shay.
As far as speaking with, there was whose child has a racist family?
So Bianca Epson says that she has a friend whose parents are racist, and so her daughter is concerned that due to protests, she might not have her friend anymore. So how does she address that with her daughter?
Right, and I think that opens up a platform for a great discussion as far as how race relations impact our personal relationships. I would be open and honest with her and let her know that people have differences in opinion, and that's what it's gonna be. That's kind of our life right now. I will also not feel insecure about not having an answer. Like sometimes you just don't know as a parent, and you have to be okay with saying like, baby, I really don't know how that's going to be, but we're going to handle that when it comes. I get her ready for the possibility that it could be the end of a relationship. I would talk to her about what that would look like, how she would feel, try to get her to start verbalizing some of those emotions that she could foresee, and talk about the wonderful things about her friend, because at the end of the day, the parents may have a certain feeling, but children, they love, and her friend, her school friend may not have adopted the teachings, even though the parents may say we can't be friends. They may not be able to be friends outside of school, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be nice and cordial to people. And I always tell my daughters and my clients, like, don't ever let anyone change who you are just because they are not reciprocating your niceness. So just continue to encourage her to be strong and to love and to respect the little girl in school. That would be my suggestion. I think I'm trying to think. It was another question.
So the other question had to do with how can individuals who don't have children support the young people that they see, who are protesting, who are part of everything that they see happening on social media, et cetera. So how can they show up in the lives of young people?
Man, I think that is a wonderful question. And I think the way to do that is to form villages. We have gotten rid of villages raising our children, and ask if people around you with children, do you need help? Have you talked to your children about some of these things? Lend a hand, bounce ideas back and forth with your friends or coworkers or whomever that does have children, and lend any helpful information or conversation starters that you may have. Ask parents how they're doing, and again, and how you can help. It's kind of hard helping other people's children, I guess, not through the parent or not through the guardian, but I just be there and be open to help. I think that is honestly one of the best things that you can do, and keep an arsenal of resources just in case someone is actually interested in receiving your help and your concern.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shay. And I know that Talea listed she put a resource in the chat, selskills.com. I think that will also be added to our resource guide, and everything that was stated this evening is going to be added. I know that there were some questions that were outside the guide, and so we're going to build those in so that everyone has that. And I just really want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight for this conversation. This was such a great way to ensure that we are showing up in the lives of our children and of our youth. So thank you to each of our presenters. Thank you to Carla Blackwell. You can't see her. She was running our presentation, so we thank you for that. And again, the resource guide will be shared with each and every one of you. That will be sent via email, and it will be on our website. Thank you again to the presenters. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for the attendees for coming this evening and being a part. Tune in for additional programming that I know is going to be coming to connect with our young people and our students. So lots to come, but thank you all again for investing in our youth. So have a great evening, and thank you for joining us. Bye, everyone.